As usual, I like to get out a little bit of a thing right up front to make sure that, well, it's kind of a filter, really. It's to, like, a lot of people only watch the first few seconds or minutes of a video. That's actually extraordinarily common. So if someone comes here expecting me to just do nothing but praise the game, then they now know it's not. So they know it's not a video they want to watch. And I don't have that person telling me in the comment section about how I am terrible and should shoot myself. So I did give this game a net negative gameplay, or just golden number score. I have to say gameplay specifically because it actually scored net positive on the story axis, which probably won't surprise you. But the overall thing was dragged down. Okay, there's the bombshell. But honestly, it's not actually all that surprising. In fact, well, let's just talk about this for a minute. So we've got the control system, which is old and clunky and involves far too many clicks and far too many weird dragging and dropping and grabbing and using, and just some odd perspective and odd control system, which you can at least get used to. But then there's the unusual physics engine, which has absolutely no idea whatsoever how to deal with certain types of things, notably certain types of terrain. You just kind of bounce around like you're jumping around on cobblestone, which can get in the way of you doing some of the platforming you need to do and dodging enemies, which of course the enemies can just shoot you from around the corner the millisecond that they see you with a hit scan weapon, so that's always fun. There's also, oh god, there's so many sections of just needless backtracking. There's almost no information whatsoever in the actual game to elucidate upon how anything works, if not for the wonderful and helpful viewers, and of course an actual walkthrough I finally pulled up, actually 3 walkthroughs I pulled up after a certain point in time. I still would not know how certain things work in the game, how certain mechanics work, how certain items work, whatever. The cyberspace thing is completely unexplained and disorienting as hell. Like, I get what they were going for, but I actually had a few people bow out during that section because it was just too disorienting. That was actually causing them some nausea issues. I mentioned backtracking. So this is wonderful. As you're going through the levels, you can encounter these big reactor things that massively reduce the security for that level, right? If you successfully do that, a number pops up, which you may not even notice on a nearby panel. If you don't notice that and don't jot it down, you get to the second to last part of the entire game, and it's like, hey, so go do that. Real question, how many of you, the first time you played this, didn't know or didn't think to either destroy those things or to jot down those numbers? Now, I can't raise my hands because this was my first time playing. That's why it was a Premiere run. That's the distinction. For those of you still wondering, Classic Run is a game I've played before. Premiere Run is a game I haven't. Pretty simple. Anyway, so, I knew walking in, I was well warned in advance, hey, make sure you jot down those numbers because it's going to save you a lot of backtracking later. But I want you to imagine how frustrating that would be getting to that point. Now, even if you do know what you're doing, though, there's a certain section of the game where you have to, oh god, let me see if I can track all this. So you have to go to the groves, and then go through the groves, and then hit a switch, and then go out, and then hit the main switch, and then find out that it's broken, and then go down to another level, down to level 3, I want to say. And then figure out where the maintenance thing is, and then figure out the thing that's broken, and then go find the item to go repair it, and then go repair it, and then go back up, and then try the main switch, and then go back to the groves, and then hit their switches, and it's just this one massive section of padding. It's probably the worst part of the entire game. And it's just, oh god, and I'm just sitting here going, argh. And the whole time, the audio design was physically hurting my ears. I did turn everything down substantially, and of course, I tried to talk pretty continuously. We were talking about like Star Wars and the big acquisition thing, news that just went through today, and all sorts of other fun stuff. Just mostly to keep this stream entertaining, but also to make sure that the sound wouldn't be as bad for the viewer, so they wouldn't have to experience what I was experiencing, because it was literally physically painful the way it was doing the lack of audio balancing, and the sound design, which I needed the sounds. I needed to be able to hear the enemies and hear when I got hit, because it's one of my only indicators of several of those things. But then there's the music. Now, this is a weird one, because I've heard a lot of differing opinions on this thing and differing accounts. But I have noticed that I've seen several other people who do either runs or speed runs or walkthroughs or whatever of this game where the music sounds exactly the same. It is the exact same, default Windows MIDI font. And the reason I mention that specifically is because a theory that was posited several times is the music was actually bugged in this particular port, that it literally was translated wrong. which is really easy to do when it comes to MIDI, because MIDI is just, channels and then data per channel and then instrument per channel. There you go. That's MIDI and in just a very, very basic format. So if they were to, for example, accidentally change the code on this channel and this channel, well, then you'd have the main theme is all of a sudden the percussion in the background, and the percussion is suddenly the main theme. That's not going to sound wrong, which is exactly what the game sounded like. This is some of the worst music I've ever heard in gaming. Now, again, it's very possible this is a bugged situation, and it's just the modern ports. So we were playing the enhanced version specifically, the GOG version of that specifically. And again, I've seen other people's playthroughs where they have the exact same sound problems. I did try to fix it in my own little clunky way by going ahead and changing around the sound font that Windows 10 uses for MIDI, which was way too much of a hassle, by the way. That should not be that irritating to do. But I did it. And then that didn't help. And then I tried another sound font, and then that didn't help. And then I gave up. It's like, okay, whatever. Nothing I could do, right? So a constant audio irritation, either from the sound effects or from the music. Occasionally we'd turn the music off and just play something else like Mechanicus or whatever. Combined with constant irritation of playing means that I am having not a good time 100% of the time I'm playing the game. Now, you see it, right? You see the pause here? It's so interesting to cover a game like this, if I might be so bold, because there's a lot of good core heart behind this game. And in fact, this is going to sound like a backhanded compliment, and I in no way mean it as such. This game should be worse than it is. A 1994 PC immersive sim, I hate that phrase, dungeon crawler with story focus. This is the kind of thing that really should be crap. And you're like, but Lore, it is crap. Well, it isn't. That's the weird thing. There's several aspects of this game design that were not negatives. And I know that doesn't sound like a glowing praise, but in all sincerity, this game probably, if it was a typical game of the era, would at least earn another 10, maybe even 15 negatives to get to the gameplay axis, which it didn't. Because it did quite a bit right, or at least right enough to not be bad. I mentioned, one of the things I talk a lot about is viscerality. And you're probably thinking, okay, how can a game from 1994 on the PC have good weapon viscerality? Well, there's 3 spokes of viscerality, right? Sound design, totally not there. Visual design, totally not there. But hang on. The third design is oomph, feel. This is its impact. And I've seen a lot of games do good sound design and good animation or visual design, but absolutely fail at this third point. Looking at you, Borderlands. And Borderlands 2. And you get the point. So instead, what we have guns and weapons and swords that actually have really good oomph to them. You run up and smack someone with the pipe and they just fall over, or you sit back and you blow them away with the scorpion and you're actually getting you're getting knocked down and your camera's going down as you're shooting this thing because it is absolutely shredding the enemy. Or you got what's it called? The mag pulse? Bam! And it just absolutely destroys whatever it's hitting. You get the idea. Even the lightsaber sword thing, which was my primary weapon for most of the game, still absolutely tears through enemies. So there is actually decent viscerality to it. Okay, well, that's one thing. Well, what else? Well, I could mention the graphics. They're not exactly cutting edge, but for a game that came out in 1994, which has barely been polished up by the enhanced edition, these are pretty legit, all things considered. It's not quite to the point of being, fantastical, and I'm going to, fall over myself praising the sprite work and whatnot. But a lot of effort was clearly put into making each level look different from each other visually, and each level had its own visual kicks and styles, which also adds to the visual continuity, which is something I talk about semi-frequently. Visual continuity is about being able to know where landmarks are and helping you to navigate visually. Games with good visual continuity are, I suddenly can't think of any, of course, because I'm stupid. I guess Subnautica would be a good example. But you get the idea. There's either landmarks or there's good visual variance between certain areas and certain realms, so that you can see at a glance, aha, that's where I am and that's where I'm going. That's visual continuity. It also is tied with visual distinction, which this game doesn't do quite as well as because of the lighting issues, but I know there's way around the lighting issues, but the point remains. So that's actually pretty good. It's decent. It looks cool, and it helps you navigate. And that's another thing. With only one pretty minor exception, I never got lost in this game. And this is leading to my really big point. The level design is surprisingly good. I didn't even realize this until today, which is our final day of streaming this, that this is a dungeon crawler at its core and its heart. I mean, there's other aspects to it, of course, but it feels like it's a game made by people who know what they're doing. I don't know how to properly put this, so I'm just going to speak in vagaries. One of the things I always pay attention to in game design is level layout, level design. Level design is important in almost every type of game, even a game that otherwise doesn't involve a lot of platforming or action or whatever. Nevertheless, you do want the level to be well designed. You want to make sure the player is inclined towards things. You want to make sure there's a pattern to what is being distributed where. What this event happens here, and therefore this event happens here, which leads you to this event happens here. This is true with RPGs. This is true with platformers. This is true with an enormous quantity of games. Even racing games have to have good level design. It's kind of the core point of those games. This has surprisingly good level design. I was impressed by it enough to give it a positive worthy. And this is part of everything I've been talking about so far. You know, the layout and the item distribution, where the enemies are, and where the res spots are, where the elevators are, the landmarks you can place, the fact that you can mark the map in-game with your own little notes, which is very helpful. There's all sorts of things done to make it interesting to traverse and progress through it. And all of that makes the game substantially better than it probably should be, like I said. Then you add on the story axis. Now, let's go ahead and get this out of the way, with one very noteworthy exception. The voice acting in this game sucks. Oh my god. We were having so much fun laughing about it on stream because there's so many parts. I can't even emulate it. I have spent too much of my life practicing good acting to do bad acting. You know what that is, right? I've talked about that before. It's hard to do bad acting on purpose. There's just people who, like, oh my god, hey, it's a giant mecha that's about to rip me to shreds. Huh. Oh well. And it's like, it's so nonchalant. It really does. I mean, this is something that happened pretty frequently in this era, in voice acting in particular, is rather than getting in voice actors or people who know voice acting, you would bring in the intern or Bob from accounting. You know the trend, right? You know the trope. And it's just, yeah, come on, just say your lines real quick. This is something that's been done up until at least the aughts, I want to say. I think Star Trek Online is the last game I've seen where they did that kind of, just whoever around the office voice acting, until the game got big and they were able to actually afford, Trek actors to come on the show. But anyways, or on the game, excuse me. But the point being, the voice acting is god-awful, which is why it is so weird that they stumbled onto the woman who plays Shodan. Now, obviously, Shodan is the star of the show. I don't even feel the need to explain that because I've already done a Rumination on System Shock 2. And if you remember that Rumination, Shodan was shoved into that game in part because of her massive popularity from this game. So, yeah, no, that tracks. And she is a well-beloved villain for many reasons and has served as an inspiration for many villainesses since. In fact, one of the things, I don't remember if I mentioned this, but during the Portal run, one of the thoughts I had was that GLaDOS was inspired by Shodan, and that's absolutely true. Shodan's awesome. I don't have much to add to that, because she's just got a presence to her. She's so stupid. It's actually funny how stupid she is. But she at all times still comes across as menacing. And a particular flavor of menacing. Between the jittery speech thing, which they did an excellent job of the audio editing on, and the oozing menace that comes across in her voice, it really sells the character in a way that, honestly, again, she probably doesn't deserve. One of the things I noticed, and I'm sure any of you who's played this game with any of the voice acting, so the CD version and onwards noticed this, is that the game's voice acting actually doesn't line up with the text. I think 100% of the time, it never matches the text. But in several cases, I think that was actually for the better. Especially on Shodan. Most of Shodan's actually literal text was just, I will kill you and you're stupid. When she actually speaks, far more menacing. It's just far more pleasantly designed in its own horrific way. So wonderful praise to the team on that front. But hang on. I don't want to just talk about Shodan, because there's one other aspect of the story that I never hear anybody talk about, and it's actually kind of brilliantly horrific. This is so down to earth, and it adds a layer of enjoyment to the overall work for me personally. What's the plot of System Shock 1? You can pause the video if you want to go ahead and jot down. I'm curious how many of you remember it or what answer you get. I really am. So if you feel like doing this, please feel free. I do read all those comments. I'll give you a second. So the plot of Shodan, wow. The plot of System Shock 1 is some low-level nobody vice president, who is totally a chronic, by the way, named Diego. Says, you know what? I've been doing corrupt, stupid things, and I need to help cover up for myself. So you know what? I'm gonna tap that hacker we just caught, and I'm gonna bring him up, and he's gonna unshackle the AI, and the AI is gonna help cover my tracks for me. Oh, it worked. Cool. You know, I'm going to go mad with power very quickly and start actually killing people and almost kill us, the hacker in question, because I'm a tiny, dinky little minnow who has suddenly gotten a taste of power. He is such a Krennic character. He is so minuscule and thinks he is such big stuff. And he is an ant compared to the thing that he is bargaining with. Even the rest of Trioptimum treats him like a nothing. But then he actually fully unleashes Shodan, and there's this great tidbit where he's like, I pledge myself to you, Shodan. And I love that bit, because you could say it's because he's crazy or because he's stupid, but ultimately it's because he is so monumentally self-unaware, self-blind, that he actually thinks he can bargain with Shodan. We see exactly how that turned out, don't we? He is the only boss character of the game, but yeah, no, it didn't work out super well for him. And I love that all of the events of this game and all the death and all the suffering and all the mutations and System Shock 2, which not only because of Shodan, but because of, the launching of the Beta Grove, cough, cough. All of this crap all came because one stupid middle manager decided to be a little bit too big for his britches. I love the simplicity of it. I love the banality of it. And I just wanted to gush about that for just a second. Anyways, so yeah, the final thing I want to say here, the final little tidbit, is that this game must have been mind-blowing in 1994. I didn't play this until recently, but I think I gave that away. I played System Shock 2 as my first entry to the series. But I can imagine this game being absolutely mind-blowing in the day, so it makes sense why it would explode in the way that it did and got so many people's attention the way it did and inspired so much the way that it did. But even if we throw all the historical context out of the window, which I do for my reviews, there's still obvious heart here. This is something I've brought up before. There's different types of bad, right? And this is bad with heart. It's very clear that there is actual talent and actual care put into the game. And it was really trying some new things and really pushing the envelope. And I have to give it credit for that. Curious to see your all's thoughts and how many people hate me in the comment section. I'll see you next time.